All right, everybody. Welcome to another Monday night, or as I like to call it, a Marauder Monday. Thank you so much for being here, and obviously we have a lot to talk about. It's been an interesting week, and there are some things that we need to discuss when it comes to being prepared for what lies ahead. And of course, the title of tonight's live stream is Get Ready to Survive Unrest, State Failures, and the Fallout of War, because I do believe those are all challenges we're going to face here in the very near future. And that's not something I want to have to believe, but it's something that I can be logical and practical about and try my best to adapt to. So even if those things don't come to fruition, I'll still be better off afterward. All right, so good to see everybody. We got 5x5 coming in. Exile Review says so. Good to see you as well. Thanks for being here and helping to mod. Harbor Prepper, good to see you. Ghost Lincon is here. Gen X Gemini 5x5. Sterox says 5x5 magic. David Sickles, good to see you. I guess it's just Dave. Sorry I went so proper on you. But it is good to see everybody. And I am a little bit more healthy than I was last week. So thanks for bearing with me through that interesting little Cruella de Vil voice that I suddenly developed overnight, apparently. Now, let's see. Neil Francisco says 5x5. Looks like we're good to go. All right. What's going on in the world? There's a lot of interesting things that we need to discuss. And if you're here on the replay, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. And of course, just because I don't usually ask for this and it's not something that I am good about being on top of, if you guys want to hit that thumbs up and do all those YouTube things, that would really help me out because, you know, I am battling an uphill battle when it comes to this platform. Be aware of that. I'm sure you are. What's first? Well, I think the biggest thing we need to discuss and just be very aware of is just where this whole banking crisis is kind of heading and why you should be prepared for it to get worse, even though there are indicators to show that it might be okay or things might be leveling out, right? Well, we've all seen this before. So let's talk about what's happening right now and just recently happened, and then I'll also explain why we should prepare for things to bottom out once again and in a more catastrophic way than they did recently here, just because of precedent that's been set in the past, right? And this kind of goes into the state failures aspect of tonight's conversation, and that will kind of be a continual theme, but you'll see why all the different things we're talking about are related to what's happening right now in the world, and especially here in the United States, okay? So, let's talk about this whole banking crisis situation and what we need to watch out for moving forward. All right, and just in case anybody perceives this as anything other than it's not, this is not financial advice, and I'm not telling you what to do at all in that regard, but I was going to say that as like a little disclaimer to make sure that I'm somewhat protected in case somebody mistakes everything that I say tonight, right? Okay. This is from March 19th, okay? So this is all very relevant and recent. Bank fail, how rising interest rates paved the way for Silicon Valley Bank's collapse. This is from NPR, right? And this kind of explains everything that was going on there. And we know that this bank was kind of the catalyst to everything else that started and everyone starting to pay attention and getting concerned about their money and whether or not it was secure. And of course, this is where some of those bank runs started to develop. So I think this is still important for us to keep an eye on to see what's happening here. But this is where things got a little bit rough for them, and it gives you an idea as to how some of these other financial institutions might be operating and why they're also at risk here moving forward, okay? So, bonds, the riskless asset. And this is kind of where they got themselves in trouble, so I want to go over this really quickly so you can understand why other institutions might fall to the same trap here very soon, okay? Bonds are like a little loan you give the government for 3 months, 1 year, 10 years, etc., depending on which bond you buy. At the end of that time, the government will pay you back for that loan plus a little interest. U.S. bonds are considered to be the safest investment on the planet. The U.S. always pays back its debts. They're often called a riskless asset, which is interesting because there's literally no way we'll ever pay back more than $32 trillion worth of debt, but I'll keep going on from there, okay? The downside, government bonds don't pay out a lot. Super safe, not super profitable. But some of these bonds are slightly more profitable than others. Longer-term bonds, like 10-year bonds, typically pay out more at the end than the 3-month or 1-year bonds, which makes sense. Long-term bonds mean you agree to lend the government your money for years. You get more yield, a bigger payoff for that wait, right? Now, here's the risky business that Silicon Valley Bank was active in, and of course this is what led them to their demise. Silicon Valley Bank locked billions of dollars away into 10-year bonds, right? When you have billions of dollars, even the smallest of percentage interest rates make you a lot of money, of course. But there were risks it wasn't seeing. Risk one, and this is why I wanted to go over this article really quickly because it kind of breaks it down really nicely so you can understand why this is probably going to keep happening to other institutions. Access. Those billions were now locked up for years. It wouldn't be easy to get that money in an emergency. That's an issue. That's something that I think about relatively often as a prepper. Like, are the assets I have set aside for those just-in-case situations accessible, or would they just disappear into thin air in the matter of an emergency, right? Risk number 2, interest rates. When interest rates started going up, the market value of Silicon Valley Bank's bonds went down. Exactly. That's what happens when interest rates start going up and when they've been artificially held at zero for so long, including during the times where those bonds were purchased, I'm sure. That's because the bank bought its government bonds before interest rates started going up. The price you get from bonds is directly tied to interest rates. When interest rates go up, the market price of older bonds goes down because new bonds pay out higher interest rates. When rates started climbing quickly, the price of Silicon Valley Bank's bonds tumbled. Risk number 3, really, really rich customers, okay? When rumors started up about the bank, customers panicked and started pulling their money out because there were rich individuals and companies that meant multi-million, even multi-billion dollar accounts cashing out all at once. Silicon Valley Bank needed a lot of cash fast, but of course, a lot of its cash was locked up in 10-year bonds. Now it had to try to sell those to get cash, right? And here's where things really fell apart. That's why where the interest rate risk bit Silicon Valley Bank, trying to sell those second-hand, low interest rate bonds at a moment when all the new bonds being issued paid out far more was not easy. Now that same bond and the yield would be about 20 times higher, says Mark Williams. So to encourage investors to even think about your old bond, you would have to discount it. Discount as in a fire sale. Silicon Valley Bank took huge losses selling off its bonds, and more investors panicked and pulled out their money. Williams says it was a bank run on a scale the U.S. hadn't seen since the Great Depression, right? Now, that's what happened there. And this whole situation here, this guilt by association section down here just talks about how this is where the bank runs begin, because basically everybody's associated starts seeing the pattern and they start freaking out and panicking, and everything kind of just compounds on top of the last thing, right? Well, you can understand why their whole system and their whole strategy failed, because in an emergency, they weren't able to access the funds required in order to meet the demand from their customers, right? And this is why I would concern myself with understanding that most of these other financial institutions operate in a very similar manner. They want to invest in safe bets, and they're going to tie their money up for longer in order to have maximum profits, which means that money might not be accessible when needed, which is probably why we're going to see a lot more of this, right? So, good evening to you as well, Warrior for Christ. Good to see you here. We got Bobo World here as well. Now, where does this go from here? Well, there's a few other things going on right this second that lead us into the rest of the conversation relating to this whole bank failure crisis that we're all witnessing right now, okay? So, First Republic shares are plunging, okay? We know that. This is one of those next banks that are like set to kind of fall off to the wayside, right? This is going to be pretty bumpy going forward. First Republic stock shares plunge almost 50% as people move their money despite a $30 billion bailout. Now, this is from today, March 20th, all right? So this is all very relevant and new information. Basically, First Republic Bank is falling apart. They lost 50% of their value, even though other banks and financial institutions have come together to raise $30 billion for them in order to try to stabilize what's happening to their company, right? So, let's see here. Withdrawals slowed somewhat last week after a consortium of 11 banks, including JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America, banded together and on Thursday announced a $30 billion deposit at First Republic to help stabilize it. But over the long term, the bank is far from safe, especially after multiple rating agencies, including Fitch Ratings, Moody's, and S&P Global, issued negative credit ratings for the bank over the past week. So even with a $30 billion injection, this bank is still on its way down, and in fact, one of the lowest performers of the market today, as at least from my knowledge, right? Of course, there's always those penny shares and everything else that just go all over the place, but this is a major financial institution that shouldn't be dropping 50% of value within a single day of trading, right? Now, why does this matter? Well, that $30 billion bailout is something that we've seen in the past, and it has saved things in the past in the immediate. But what happens after the fact? Well, let's move on to what happened today as a whole related to the banking and financial institutions. And then we'll move on to where all this leads to. I promise this whole live stream is kind of structured in a way where you'll understand why these things are all interconnected and why we should prepare for everything I'm telling you should prepare for today, okay? So, stocks close higher on Monday as banking crisis fears ease, right? So First Republic Bank is just one bank, but stocks are closing higher and all the banks are feeling a little bit better because you have Credit Suisse basically being bought up by USB or UBS. Sorry about that. I just really like USBs, I guess. I charge a lot of things. But Credit Suisse was bought by UBS, and that made everyone feel better, as in, oh, there is a safety net, someone's stepping in, we're not going to let this gigantic bank collapse. So things are starting to look better because people are taking initiative and doing something to make sure that we stabilize, right? Stocks closed higher on Monday as traders grew hopeful that a crisis in the banking sector may be easing. The gains followed a forced takeover of Credit Suisse by UBS, engineered by the Swiss government. Oh, thank God the government stepped in. We know they love to fix our problems for us. The Dow Jones Industrial Average jumped 382.6 points, or 1.2% to close at 32,244.58. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 rose 0.89% to end the session at 3,951.57. The Nasdaq Composite gained 0.39% and closed at 11,675.54. Now, first off, don't you love how even in a extreme economic turmoil period of time, the stock market can still make gains and still be like cruising right along, right? This is all so artificial at this point. I mean, I don't even know what to say, but here we are, right? And we are witnessing quite the collapse right in front of our eyes. And why are we being told this right now? Well, here's the thing. Stocks close higher on Monday as banking crisis fears ease, right? Perfect. We're having people step in. Banks are getting bought up. Things are stabilizing. Investors are getting a little bit more comfortable. We're gaining a full percentage point in the Dow, so we can move forward. And everything's going to be fine, everybody. Don't worry. Don't panic. Don't pull all your money out, okay? Now, let's go back to 2008, because I'm going to show you that this exact cycle has happened before, and I'm going to show you the timeline that it happened back then to give you an idea of what maybe to expect here moving forward. Because as preppers, I think during this kind of economic turmoil, we should at least be aware of what we're working with when it comes to timelines and what to expect next. Because if you just read the headlines right now, you could say, well, it looks like they figured it out, so I think we're going to be okay. Okay? I'm here to tell you I wouldn't be that optimistic. I'm not saying for sure we're not going to be okay, but I'm definitely not optimistic about our outlook, let's just say, okay? I'm not the best 8-ball for somebody who's worried about every decision they're ever going to make in their life, I guess. All right, and just jump in the chat here for a second. I see everybody is saying hello. Ghost Lincon, someone did say coffee, and you're right, it's a great time to take a sip. In case you guys don't know, I need the coffee not only to keep my mouth from becoming incredibly dry while talking for an hour straight, but I also like to be as energetic as possible for all of you. So I'm doing it for you, all right? So what happened in 2008? Well, here's a little story for you to give you some ideas to what to expect here moving forward and why things could get a little bit weird, okay? This is from the New York Times, and this is from October of 2008, okay? October 14th, 2008, to be exact, all right? On Monday, for the first time this October, the Dow Jones Industrial Average ended the day higher than it began. 936 points higher, to be exact. Making for the biggest single-day percentage gain in 75 years. The surge came as governments and central banks around the world mounted an aggressive, coordinated campaign to unlock the global flow of credit, an effort that investors said they had been waiting for. Because we had to make sure to save some of the banks that were having a hard time, right? Some experts greeted the rally as a turning point in the slow-motion crash. Let me read that again for you so you can understand how these timelines work. Slow-motion crash that has erased 5 years worth of value from the stock market in the last few weeks. 5 years of value gone in a few weeks. Seems like that could happen pretty quickly overnight, I guess. When Monday began, shares of some blue chip companies were at their cheapest levels in years. The market clearly was getting priced for an Armageddon, a depression for the end of Western civilization as we know it, said Edward Yardeni, the investment strategist. A lot of people realized these were extraordinarily good prices to buy stocks. But others warned that the problems at the center of the current crisis, including a global credit squeeze and worsening economic conditions, were far from solved and could set the stage for more volatility in the markets, okay? So this was from October 14th, 2008, all right? Now, remember what I just told you about how we had SVB Bank collapse, we had Credit Suisse luckily bailed out, but First Republic Bank still lost 50% of its value. But don't worry, because banks are coming together, 11 in total in financial firms, to help save some of these other banks by injecting $30 billion. And we also have Credit Suisse being bought by UBS with the help of the Swedish government. So, the Swiss government, sorry about that. But either way, we're on our way because everything's fine now, okay? Now, oh, and by the way, relief poured through the markets. 11.6% gain in the broad Standard & Poor's 500 stock index was that gauge's best single-day gain since 1939. 11%. where did I hear that number before? I don't know. Don't worry about it. Anyway, what happened very soon after that situation? And this is also from 2008. So this is why I wanted to share this with you, to give you a unfortunately grim reminder as to what occurred just 15 years ago and what we did not learn at that time, apparently, okay? This is also from the New York Times, okay? On December 2nd, 2008. So less than 2 months from that previous article I just showed you, where the Dow jumped 11% and everybody was happy because the banking crisis was, finally getting solved. Cheer fades as stocks plunge 9%, okay? December blew in with a mighty chill on Wall Street. In 6.5 hours on Monday, the Standard & Poor's 500 stock index declined nearly 9%. Well, it went up 11% in October. Yeah, well, the type of collapse that historically has taken years to occur. But in 2008, a year that has now been officially declared to be in a recession, the drop registered with a resigned sense that, yes, this awful year still has yet another month to go. The sell-off, which erased nearly all the gains enjoyed by the stock market in Thanksgiving week, came as investors flocked to the safety of government notes. Interesting. Driving their yields to near-record lows as concern mounted that the economy could get much worse before it improves. Okay? Investors have long assumed that the country was in a recession. Weird. Kind of like we all assume we're in a recession, even though we're still being told that we're not quite there yet. And analysts said that after last week's gains, including the biggest 5-day rally in decades, a sell-off was to be expected. But perhaps not this fast, and not this deep. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped by 679.95 points, or 7.7%, all but wiping out a 783-point gain built up last week. The S&P 500 gave back 80 points of the 96-point gain from the same period. NASDAQ Composite Index was also off 9%. Okay, so in a period of less than 2 months, we went from the financial institution saying, don't worry, we're having a rally, the banks are getting injected with additional funds, more financing has been found, credit has been opened up, and now we are back up 11%. And in 2008, the same thing happened, except for less than 2 months later, it all dropped off once again. So keep that in mind, because this could take a while. We could see this story and say, okay, everything's fine now, and then 2 months from now, the floor gets pulled out from under you, right? So this is what we should be paying attention to. Use precedent, use historical precedent to kind of game plan what to expect here moving forward. These strategies are always the same strategies. They don't come up with these new ideas to necessarily combat these failures and all these economic challenges that they're facing. They go back to the textbook, right? And the textbook says, do this, this, and this, and you'll be good for like a month or two. And then after that, we'll see what happens, right? And so that's kind of what we're experiencing right now. And I just wanted to give everybody that kind of introduction to what happened in 2008 compared to what's happening now, to give you an idea as to what to expect. And I think that that's a reasonable place to kind of look for answers based on the current economic crisis and the conditions that were going on during that time, right? Okay, so Derek Boodle. Beggars can't be choosers. Heard that. Warrior for Christ. That EMP bag was nice. Yes, it is definitely nice. I agree with you on that. And as many pointed out, is it also expensive? Yes, it is. So that's just how nice things are sometimes, I guess. So it is what it is. DIY is always an option. Although you do have to be somewhat handy to make it a viable option. Keep that in mind as well. I've seen some terrible DIY projects made by yours truly. Moving forward, okay. Let's see. The Prepping Mantis says current crisis is 50% worse than 2008 already. And I can agree with you quite a bit on that. In fact, I think we're in a much worse position. And in fact, in 2008, we weren't on the edge of a global catastrophe like World War III, but here we are. So there's a lot of things that make this much worse. And the bubble is a lot bigger, as Small Town 1776 points out. So all these things are true. And man, that's why we needed to go over that, to remind you that even back then when things weren't as bad as they are now, they still had the same exact strategy and the same exact pitfalls, and they gave us a timeline to at least game plan around, okay? Now, Black Flag, I do notice you. I always notice you. Don't worry about it, okay? Let's see here. What is the elephant in the room, and where does this economic turmoil lead to? Well, state failures and economic turmoil always lead to unrest. They always do, because people get fed up. And people are fed up already, and people get desperate. So when you can't afford your basic necessities, and when the government's not doing their job, and when they're still taking your money in the sense of taxes, and you end up being in a position where you have nothing left to lose, that creates a perfect environment for unrest. And that's exactly where we're heading in many ways, and that's where the world is already at in many ways. And we're going to discuss America, and then we're going to discuss what's happening in other parts of the world to give you some reference as to what we should expect here based on what's happening over there in many ways. Like, these things are all very connected, and everyone's just on a different timeline, and so we have to use others' timeline in order to kind of make sure we're ready for our own, I guess. I keep using that timeline philosophy tonight. I'm on a time kick, you know? Maybe I'll start talking about time travel as a relevant preparedness item that would be good to have, right? At the minimum, a DeLorean, because, I mean, maybe that car is just automatically EMP proof. I don't know, okay? So, there are a lot of chatter type things going on the internet and everything else related to this elephant in the room, which is what's happening with the former president at this time. Barricades set up outside Trump Tower, Manhattan court, as New York City readies for protests. Now, news just recently came out that the likelihood of this arrest happening tomorrow has been pushed back to like next week. However, we just don't know. And if there is any kind of call to action that has occurred, which in some ways there has been, people are expected to demonstrate or behave a certain way tomorrow. So a lot of places around the country are getting ready for that, apparently, okay? So, of course, this is going to spark unrest. Using the law as a way to persecute political opponents is very frowned upon and generally used in conjunction with authoritarian, totalitarian regimes, right? I mean, that's just what happens in third world countries. That's what happens in other places that aren't America, and yet we are here now. And listen, if politicians break the law, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, just like anybody else would be. I 100% agree with that. However, that needs to be universal, and it's clearly not in the system that we're currently in. So, because of that, this is, in my opinion, easily able to be considered political persecution. Now, in a spectacle, of course, and theatrics, because we all know that there's a lot of other more important things happening in the world right now. But regardless of how important those things are, regardless of whether or not this is just a giant distraction, and my opinion of these situations is probably to not get involved based on what has happened in the past and based on the fact that as preppers, generally, avoidance is the best way to stay alive if we're talking pure survival, right? I'm not sure if I'm ready to, let's just say, get too involved with any of these political parties at this point in time, because I don't believe any of them have our best interests at heart. It's all money at this point, right, and power, and I'm really concerned about the way our country is heading, but I don't like what is happening here, regardless of political affiliation. So, let's just go through the story really quick so you're all aware in case you aren't aware, okay? Donald Trump claimed on Saturday that his arrest is imminent and is issued an extraordinary call for supporters to protest as a New York grand jury investigates hush money payments. District Attorney Alvin Bragg is thought to be eyeing charges in the hush money investigation and recently offered Trump a chance to testify before the grand jury. Trump's aides and legal team have been preparing for the possibility of an indictment. Should that happen, he would be arrested only if he refused to surrender, okay? So, NYPD is seen erecting barricades Monday outside of Trump Tower, Manhattan Criminal Court, following the former president's weekend claim that his arrest is imminent, right? Unrest, regardless of the reason behind it and regardless of the catalyst of it, unrest is dangerous for everybody. And it creates situations that sometimes require solutions that go too far and impede on our rights and make things even more difficult for us in the future, in case you haven't learned any lessons from some previous unrest situations, right? So things get out of hand quickly, and of course we know that there is a certain let's just say weight placed on the scales of equality when it comes to how certain ideologies are treated in our Department of Justice and our justice system, okay? Let's see here. Do you want to mention thank you to Doggone It? I really appreciate it. And Jordambi, 2 semesters of Spanish got me on live protest news on Univision when Schumer took down my account at IndyMac. My lessons from 2008, do not trust any bank. 100%, and good on you for exercising your First Amendment right and doing what you thought was best, right? Now, here's the thing. A lot of this stuff is happening. Don't fall for it in the sense of like putting yourself into a trap per se, but understand that this is why unrest is very certain here in the near future and why these types of situations are going to continually push us towards more and more of that unrest, okay? Now, here's where I said that update came through. Law enforcement don't expect arraignment until next week. I don't know if that means we could expect unrest next week instead of tomorrow, or if we'll see it for some time at this point, or if it'll immediately start tomorrow. But regardless, this is happening. I don't think it's right. I think our government is highly corrupt and things are falling apart every single day. And the reason why I said third world problems as part of like the thumbnail of this video is because I'm really starting to feel like I live in a third world country based on a lot of things that are happening. Unchecked corruption, imbalance when it comes to our judicial system, and, you know, depending on what class you're in regarding your income level, right? You're either untouchable or you can be persecuted to the full extent of the law, especially if you live below the poverty line. So there's a lot of things that I just don't agree with anymore that feels very third world, especially when you want to talk about our supply chain, cost of goods, inflation, everything else. I don't know. It's just really difficult for me to be optimistic right now about the current status of our country. But this is the update, just saying it could be moved to next week. Now, what else is going on in other parts of the country based on this singular situation, which is one of the reasons why I think it could just be a massive distraction. Another reason why I think they're expecting something to happen so that they can react to it in a more swift and, let's just say, heavyweight style of manner, in the sense of how much authoritarian control they'll bring with them in regards to anything that does occur. But we see that these same barricades and precautions are being placed in LA as well. You know, so you have them in Los Angeles, you have them in New York. They're worried all over the country about this stuff happening, but only in the places that are predominantly, you know, one side of the equation, which is interesting because you would think that the support wouldn't be there for all of these events to occur. But as we know, according to certain groups that exist out there, it's very easy to just bust people in from all over the country. So I'm sure they're very aware of that on either side of that argument, and that's exactly what's probably happening here. Now, they're also enhancing security at the Capitol. So LA, New York, and Washington, D.C. all putting up security measures solely for this one specific event, which should tell you how much weight is being put on this particular event, how much of a distraction this can be, and why it can be very dangerous for you if you live in some of these areas, because we don't know what kind of instigators might be involved. We don't know what kind of plans there might be in the sense of trying to make things, let's just say, more dramatic than they should have been. There's a lot of things that could go wrong here. And as somebody who just tries to approach things from a logical standpoint, I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. I don't care what ideology you operate under. You have to see this for what it is, right? And understand that this is not normal behavior when it comes to the United States government and the Department of Justice, right? This is this puts us in league with, like I said before, many third world countries when it comes to the way we're operating now as a country. And that's not where I want to be. I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't care about, you know, the fact that things aren't fair around the world or anything like that regarding the status and the existence of third world countries and everything else, because yes, they're often highly exploited when it comes to labor and their resources and everything else. But as someone who wants to live here safely and comfortably with my family, I don't want us to become a third world country. And that's just honest. What do you want me to say? It's just the truth. But apparently, they're putting up barricades and stuff at the Capitol as well. Capitol Police are boosting security in preparation for unrest over a possible indictment of former President Trump. Axios has learned why it matters. The latest indication of how concerned security officials are about the ex-president's supporters committing problems if he is arrested as part of the Manhattan District Attorney's probe into a hush money payment he allegedly made. Okay? You can see how quickly this could spiral out of control. And they're very ready for it, apparently. So, yes, elephant in the room. Unrest in this country as of possibly tomorrow is because of this situation, okay? Are there a lot of other things and a lot of other reasons that, like, people should be upset at the government about, you know, like, people should be upset about in general when it comes to the status of our country and how things are being managed when it comes to our daily cost of living, our daily, you know, quality of life? I would say, yeah, there's a lot more important things to be upset about. But this is the kind of stuff that gets people riled up and organized, and that's just where we're at, okay? So, all right. GhostlinkCon, get your preps ready, build your groups, and let us all work together to keep our friends and families and groups safe. Yes, and I hope you understand, I am 100% a proponent of our community supporting each other and trying to build each other up, okay? So, regardless of what you are, in the sense of as you identify as a human being, regardless of your ideology, your religion, anything like that, let's just be prepared together so we have less problems to worry about, right? If I'm prepared and you're prepared, we don't have to worry about each other, and I think that's a really good place for us all to be. And working together as a community will probably help bridge some of those issues that those different sides of the argument might have, and everyone might realize, really, we're just trying to make things work and live as people, right? So let's do our best to support each other as a community. And look, I appreciate when everybody comes in with alternative ideas and alternative mindsets, especially when I'm talking about things that are like really expensive or pieces of gear that might not be 100% necessary but can be advantageous to own. There's a lot of things that I discuss on the channel that some people meet with a sense of volatility because it's either really expensive or maybe very niche or whatever it is. But plenty of people come into the comment section and say, hey, here's a DIY option that worked for me. It's very affordable. Or hey, here's another way you can approach this that might actually help you out in case you can't, bring yourself to make a commitment like that right now. There's a lot of great people in this community that help give everybody more options and answers. And I appreciate that just as much because I don't have all the options and answers. I can't cover every single piece of information in every single video I put out. And the fact that we're so willing to help each other is really important in my opinion. So I just wanted to throw that out there really quickly because I think that it's easy to lose track of like, hey, that's not fair, or like that, like whatever this guy is saying, I don't need to listen to, right? It's more about, well, what other options are there and how can we support? I like solutions instead of problems, and I get a lot of solutions in the comments section. I really do. Bees Nuts, I'm glad you're here. You don't have to apologize for being late. I just appreciate, I appreciate you being here, okay? And like I said, everybody, I'm not trying to get too political in this conversation, but you can read the writing on the wall and you can understand how things are being dealt with at this point in time. And as somebody who is a very adamant Second Amendment supporter, it's hard to not feel targeted and demonized by one certain camp when it comes to political ideology. However, I understand that not everything is black and white. And I understand that there are lots of people that do live in the middle ground, believe it or not, regardless of what the media would have you believe, that we can all, at least have some sort of cordial relationship with, okay? Anyway, let's go ahead and Epic Denver, that's kind of what I said already, you're right. Except for I said it in a way that didn't say that. Let's talk about some other unrest that's happening around the world right now so you can understand that it's not just here in the United States, and this is something that's becoming, endemic around the planet and has been ever since 2020 and before, but definitely since 2020. In case you didn't know, France is on fire. Paris is burning, and those protests and those riots that are happening over there are real deal stuff. This is anti-government. We're upset that you're trying to change pension laws surrounding our retirement. And the French, as you know, with the yellow vest movement and everything else that's been going on over there for quite a while now, they don't mess around when it comes to getting upset about what the government's up to, okay? All right. Violence erupts at French pension protests for third night. Authorities banned protests near the National Assembly building in Paris over plans to raise the retirement age. A location change failed to stop angry demonstrators from facing off with riot police. This is from the 18th of March, okay? This stuff is happening all the time, and we're not being told about it from mainstream media here in the United States. This doesn't really help their agenda or their narrative, because what this shows is that in places like France, where people actually have some sense of community and are feeling the burn of what the government has done to them, more so than maybe we're feeling here in the United States because of how much more authoritarian their government is, those people have finally gotten together and said, that's enough. We've had enough. And France is relatively well known for some of their revolutions. Whether or not they ended in a way that was productive or not is a different discussion. But violence broke out between protesters and security forces for a third night in central Paris on Saturday over the government's decision to abandon a parliamentary vote on unpopular pension reforms. President Emmanuel Macron's overhaul will raise the standard retirement age by 2 years, which he says is essential to ensure the system does not go bust. Okay? Now, after ministers approved the plan by decree, on Thursday, bypassing the lower house of parliament, rival opposition parties filed two separate no-confidence motions, which are due to be debated on Monday afternoon. They are expected to fail. Listen, this is only about raising the retirement age 2 years. Those people worked all their life planning to be able to retire by 62 to get their full government pensions, and they're being told that they got to work 2 more years now. Okay? Could you imagine that? Of course they're upset. But on the grand scheme of things, 2 more years of work, and people are burning Paris to the ground. And like I said, we're over here in the United States, and well, like I said, okay? So understand that the world is starting to move towards this direction of unrest. And this is why you need to be prepared. because these are dangerous environments, no matter which side you're on, and no matter if you're on no side. Right, if you're in the police, it's dangerous. If you're the protesters or the rioters, it's dangerous. And if you're just some guy trying to get to work, it's really dangerous. So be prepared for these things and try to learn from them while you can, just like we try to learn from what was happening in the summer of 2020. Because if you get caught in the crossfire of these events, it becomes a very dangerous situation very quickly, okay? So understand that. Now, what else is happening? There are other parts of the world that are experiencing similar things, and I think that this is really more concerning because if we're talking about the future of the United States, what's happening in these other countries is very problematic, and I would just say kind of a harbinger to what we could expect here in the States if things keep going the same direction they are, in the sense of transitioning towards a third world country, right? So, and I hope you guys know, I am trying to catch the chat when I can. Let's see. Daryl Calhoun, laundry time. I mean, if you can do laundry and stick around for this discussion, I would appreciate it. But if not, I understand laundry time because when you need it, you need it. And one of my weird fears I have as being a paranoid prepper type is that I will experience the EMP or the SHTF event on the worst day of laundry. Right, where my clothes basket is fuller than usual, and I have like no underwear left or something because I've been too lazy, and then boom, the big one happens and no washing machine is accessible any longer, right? Which is why I have to change our habits to make sure that that really bad laundry day just doesn't exist. But we're all human and things happen, and that's a fear of mine, so now you know. Lehem CD says, North Dakota is a good state for climate resilience. What's that part of your reason to move? If so, would you ever do a climate prep relocation vid? So it wasn't my reason to move. I moved purely for financial reasons in order to better my life by accepting a job that offered relocation that paid better than my current situation was allowing me to do in California, where quality of life was very low, cost of living was very high, and even though I was making good money in comparison to other parts of the country, I was dirt poor there. So it was a lot of things that all kind of moved me in that direction, and I had a good opportunity with a great company in North Dakota, and even though I had opportunities in other parts of the U.S. as well, that one was the one I decided to go with based on a lot of different factors, and it worked out very well for me in the long run, and I've met some great people out here, and this state has been very good to me, so nothing bad to say about North Dakota. Is it too cold sometimes? Of course, and do I like the weather? That would be saying a lie, but I do like that it's very low in the sense of population, and there's some really good people that are very like-minded, and it's very Second Amendment friendly. Now, South Africa. Widespread violence. South Africa braces for day of chaos as Marxist Party demands national shutdown, okay? This is from March 18th, all right? South Africans are nervously bracing for a controversial national shutdown on Monday amid threats of violence and looting for those who refuse to partake. Okay? This sounds like the purge. I don't care who you are, but that's what this sounds like. And this is like now. Like these things are happening now, right? And we'll move on here because this actually didn't end up happening. But I want to tell you what they were concerned about first, and then I want to tell you why it didn't happen, because you can see this exact scenario unfolding here in the United States exactly the way that they handled this scenario over in South Africa, okay? South Africans are nervously awaiting a controversial national shutdown on Monday organized by the Radical Marxist Party, which is accused of threatening violence and looting for those who refuse to take part. Amid ongoing rolling blackouts, yes, their grid is collapsing. Yes, they'll probably experience grid down at some point here. And the looming threat of a total collapse of the power grid, skyrocketing crime and unemployment and deteriorating services. Wait a second. Skyrocketing crime, unemployment, and deteriorating services. That doesn't sound familiar. The far-left Economic Freedom Fighters has announced a nationwide shutdown on March 20th to protest the ruling African National Congress government. But the country's main opposition party has warned of widespread violence if the day is allowed to go ahead. The EFF, which has been accused of inciting violence against farmers, because let's not get too carried away here, through its use of the Kill the Something song at its rallies, has warned businesses and shop owners to stay closed on Monday. Now, that would count as, in my opinion, as tea, right? Because we all know that. And I am trying my best to not say certain things here, and I don't know if I went a little too far with what this particular group was doing while reading this article, but there are things we have to be careful about discussing here on this platform because because it's this platform. I don't know what else to tell you. And I want this information to get out there rather than it being stifled and censored and then you not being able to understand what is happening, right? So I'm doing my best here. Please try to bear with me as I try to weave my way through this web of tangled ridiculousness, all right? Either way, the EFF is basically going out and saying, if you don't do what we say, we're going to do bad stuff, right? Pretty sure we have a definition for that. And we all know that it's targeting parts of the country that these people don't agree with. So, interesting situation there. Oh yeah, this is happening right now. Oh wait. Did the grid collapse and deteriorating services and quality of life and the expense of living and all those things actually, become part of the equation for why this whole situation was going to exist? Oh, it did? Weird. I had no idea those things even existed at all in South Africa, let alone here in the United States, right? So, why was this avoided? Well, how else could you avoid such a catastrophe? The government. South African military deployed to prevent planned national shutdown, right? And this is today, so 13 hours ago, okay? Listen, this is something you should take away, especially if you're one of those people who has this concept in mind about how the country might have to, change at some point in the future, right? That whole thing, okay? Well, even if you put together an entire national shutdown day and you have an entire organized group of people willing to partake in it, the military got tapped and the military shut all that down, all right? South African military deployed to prevent planned national shutdown, okay? South African authorities deployed thousands of police and soldiers to quell a threatened national shutdown on Monday by the radical opposition economic freedom fighters, with dozens of people arrested overnight. President Cyril Ramaphosa approved the deployment of more than 3,400 members of the armed forces to protect key buildings, while businesses and roads largely remained open despite the call by the country's third biggest party for nationwide protests to demand his removal from office, right? So they wanted to remove the president. They want to change the way their country's working. They planned this whole situation, and then the government came in with the military and armed guards and protected themselves, their buildings and their key buildings and structures, and nobody else, right? And made sure that it wasn't going to happen. So keep that in mind, but this is what that all leaned into. And it's weird that unrest can actually turn into war in some ways, which kind of is how this whole conversation tonight's connected. Because all these things can lead into each other. This banking crisis we talked about leads to unrest. They're just connected. People can't have their money, they're going to freak out and have civil unrest, right? Political persecution leads to unrest. Political persecution can lead to war. War can lead to economic turmoil. Economic turmoil can lead to war, right? You see how all these things are working together at this point in time? Okay, this is how this was stopped. That's why I wanted to mention that. And what else is going on in the world when it comes to unrest? And why should we prepare for these things? Now, this is really interesting, okay? I really want you guys to pay attention to this one. Because if you think the South African thing was kind of close to home in some ways, check this one out, okay? Kenya. Oh, Kenya. I don't really know what happens in Kenya. I'll be 100% honest with you. I am not someone who studies the daily activities going on within Kenya. But I can tell you this. Kenyan police fire tear gas, arrest opposition figures at protest. The nationwide protests are against the rising cost of living in Kenya and the election victory of President William Ruto. Oh, let's go ahead and find out more. The Kenyan police have used tear gas and arrested several senior opposition politicians. Oh, politicians even. Senior opposition politicians. As hundreds of people protested against President William Ruto, the high cost of living, and claims of cheating in last year's election. In Kenya, YouTube in Kenya. Veteran political figure Raila Odinga, who lost to Ruto in August poll, has urged nationwide protests as he attempts to harness dissatisfaction with the president. Hold on, wait a second. I just want you guys to be aware of this, okay? 20th of March, 2023. This is today. This isn't I pulled this out of the cache, the internet cache, the archive, so that you could see this thing that kind of relates to stuff that's happening in the world right now. This is from today, okay? Veteran political figure, oh wait, we already went over that. The discontented, not the discontinued, but some of them might end up being discontinued during this unrest. I think that was a terrible joke. The discontented includes some who voted for Ruto and feel he has not delivered on pledges to help the country's forgotten hustlers or working class Kenyans. Police officers in riot gear fired tear gas at hundreds of rock-throwing protesters in the capital Nairobi's vast Kibera slum, who chanted, "Ruto must go." They also used tear gas to disperse demonstrators trying to gather in the central business district, where Odinga has called for a march towards the president's state house residence, Reuters reporters said. Does this all sound like anything else that could possibly happen somewhere else? Also, is this a you guys tell me in the chat, because I know there's a bunch of gun nerds here, and I'm looking at this and I'm like, is this a FAL? Is this an FAL, or is this a G3? I can't tell. I don't know. Maybe it's a set me. You let me know. I'm having a hard time with that one just because of that giant canister launcher strapped to the end. In the western city of Kisumu, an Odinga stronghold, police fired barrages of tear gas in the direction of protesters who had started fires in the road. At least 4 members of parliament were arrested during protests in Nairobi, including the minority leaders of the National Assembly and Senate. Odinga spokesman Dennis Onyango said. Nairobi Police Chief Adamson Bunji told reporters he would have details about the arrest later in the day. Despite Ruto's promises to bring down living costs since taking power in September, inflation has remained high in East Africa's economic powerhouse, rising to 9.2% in February. Man, 9.2%. That's actually not too bad. Kenya's got it figured out better than the United States. But it's interesting that we have all of these things. Oh, wait, one more thing. Odinga, who has lost 5 presidential elections, has cast a demonstration as an opportunity to protest against the August vote, which he says was tainted by fraud. He challenged the results in the Supreme Court last year, but the court affirmed Ruto's win, and there was little of the violence that marred elections in 2007 and 2017. This is today in Kenya. In Kenya, okay? But you understand how we can draw parallels here, right? I mean, cost of living in this country, it's not very good. Does everybody think that the leadership we currently have is fully legitimate? That's something people talk about, right? Are people upset and have, their guy instead? Yeah. Are political opponents being arrested? Yeah. Wait a second. Is Kenya a third world country? No, they're pretty first world, right? I mean, they have the slums that we just talked about, that whole neighborhood that the media even calls the slums. But yeah, no, that's this is normal, so we're good. But I just want everyone to keep that in mind, okay? So anyway. Let's see. Yafet Methuselah says they barely could handle him. And, yeah, I get what you mean. But, this is, they don't use the same tactics with everyone. I think you guys know what I mean by that, too. I'm not seeing, I tried my best to, catch the chat, but I don't know if, FAL, Yardbird said it's an FAL. I'm going with FAL. So Mikey G said G3, man. That's what I wasn't sure. I was like, it's a G3, an FAL, or a set me. I really don't know. One of the three for sure. Being that it's Kenya, I want to say FAL has a better chance of probably ending up there somehow. And then again, a set me would be pretty easy to. I don't know. We're good. Christopher Reed says FAL. I'm seeing a lot of FAL votes here. Anyway. Plus, that was just fun. I just wanted to throw something out there in the chat for you guys to simmer on, all right? But anyway, those things matter. I want you to be aware of those things. Did you guys... Everyone understood where I'm coming from, right? We have economic turmoil. We have political persecution. People get mad about the two things combined. Hey, I can't afford my rent, and the guy I want to try to save me and help me afford my rent again is being politically persecuted, right? So we see the perfect storm of why unrest occurs. And then, can that lead to war? Of course. But what can war bring to the table? And are we dealing with war right now? Actually, yeah. So let's talk about that. But first, I do need to mention, biggest supporter of the channel, Midway USA, always helping me out, doing what I got to do here. And I know we've talked about things in previous live streams here on this channel that last year I told everybody, look, I'm going to be trying to figure out ways to enhance my capability on this channel by working with partners who are able to provide me with better resources, right? And Midway USA stepped up to the plate. And I'm excited about it because that's a company I've supported for over a decade now. And so not something I ever expected, and it kind of came out of thin air, and man, am I stoked. So really glad to be a brand ambassador for Midway USA, and I hope you guys understand why I think that's a good partnership. It could have been something completely different that you guys would be all angry about, and I hope Midway USA was a good choice on my part because I think they're a good company, and they do represent a lot of the things that I care about, especially when we're talking about the Second Amendment. But let's go ahead, move forward to the war stuff, because that's those things are happening too, right? I mean, yeah, no big deal. Okay. Putin flaunts alliance with Xi. I like Z. You know, that's kind of like how I like to say it, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be Xi. As dear friends meet in Kremlin, okay? Listen, if you think China and Russia aren't like allies already, I don't know what to say. They already are. Like, this isn't like a courtship or anything like that. This is them discussing their plans on what to do with the United States. That's just what I believe at this point in time. Oh, they're discussing a proposed peace plan? Really? Really they are? Okay. I'm gonna explain to you a little bit further on here why that's BS and why all the things we're doing are going to keep a peace plan from happening as well. Because it's not one-sided. Everybody's involved here, and everybody's actions have consequences no matter who you are or what side of the argument you come from, right? So, and look, I am not in support of Russia in any way, shape, or form. They're invading a sovereign country. Regardless of anything else related to the entire situation, at base value, that's what's happening, right? I guess face value makes more sense than base value, but we're based here, so it doesn't matter. We can say whatever we want. Putin flaunts alliance with Xi as dear friends meet in the Kremlin. March 20th. Oh, wait, that's today. Vladimir Putin hosted his dear friend Xi Jinping for dinner at the Kremlin on Monday, showing off his relationship with his most powerful ally, just days after an international court called for the Russian president's arrest for war crimes in Ukraine. By the way, do you guys remember when China had dinner with Trump? I think it was in like 2018, and then that was when he just like missile striked the crap out of Syria. That was just an interesting situation that I'll always remember because it was one of those things where like they were eating cake. And I remember the president at the time looked over and was like, hey, yeah, that happened, right? Here we are, another nuclear football-capable person having dinner with China, right? Anyway, Washington denounced Xi's visit, saying the timing indicated Beijing was providing Moscow a diplomatic cover to commit additional crimes. It was the first trip abroad for Xi since he obtained an unprecedented third term last month. Oh, wow, he got a third term? I can't believe it. The Chinese leader has been trying to portray Beijing as a potential peacemaker in Ukraine as he deepens economic ties with his closest ally. Oh, he might be able to make peace. What's the best way for peace in Ukraine when you involve China and Russia? I don't know, send like 1 billion dudes over there? Putin and Xi greeted one another as dear friend when they met in the Kremlin, and the Russian state news agencies later reported they held informal talks for nearly 4.5 hours, with more official talks scheduled for Tuesday. In televised comments after they greeted each other, Putin told Xi he viewed China's proposals, not propositions, for a resolution of the Ukraine conflict with respect. He confessed to being slightly envious of China's very effective system for developing the economy and strengthening the state. Man, that's super effective system. I wonder how they do it. It's like if you start the working age at something like under 10, that economy can really just start cranking, you know? But hey, it's like a miracle or some kind of mystery. So however they did it, I'm really impressed. Anyway, Xi, for his part, praised Putin and predicted Russians would re-elect him next year. Oh, so Xi got re-elected, and he's predicting Putin will get a re-election too. Man, these guys, and they do everything so fairly that, you know, it's crazy how much support they have. Under your strong leadership, Russia has made great strides in its prosperous development, he said. Moscow has been publicly promoting plans for a visit by Xi for months, but the timing gave the Chinese leader's personal support new meaning after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant on Friday accusing Putin of war crimes for deporting children from Ukraine. Okay, now listen. Xi didn't arrest Putin, so I guess he's not too worried about that warrant. But here we are. This is what's happening. This is a relationship that already exists, will exist. And listen, what a lot of people don't really think about, and I think this is kind of a good way to view it, okay? If you want to view it from this point of view to get a better understanding of like their relationship, right? Okay. Russia and China are neighbors, right? One of them supplies one with tons of resources, and the other one supplies the other with industrial support and manufacturing support, right? So they have a good relationship economically, and they're neighbors. Imagine if they didn't get along, and if China was full gung-ho anti-Russia because of this conflict. It'd be very similar to us having a fight with Mexico or Canada, and then one or the other cutting each other off. Yeah, Mexico, we lose a lot of F-150s. Canada, my syrup supply goes down. Either way, I'm just saying, like, that would be the proximity we're talking about with these larger countries that have big economies. And cutting one off would be a bad idea no matter what the situation, right? If Canada suddenly went rogue and was like, that's it, we're smashing everybody, right? And they, like, invaded Greenland or something crazy and, like, decided they were going to just start owning everybody there in the northern Atlantic, I think a lot of people would be like, don't, Canada, stop. But I don't think America would be like, that's it, no more Canada, right? So just keep those things in mind. And also, I mean, that would be kind of like a boss move. Like, I think maybe everyone would look at Canada and be like, all right, Canada, all right, Anyhow, let's move on. What else is going on? Why is this war going to keep going? Well, I guarantee you, Russia and China aren't talking about a peace proposal. That's just, if at the very least, it's a stall tactic, right? Here's why. Ukraine, 17 EU nations and Norway agreed artillery plan. March 20th. Oh, that's today. Okay. Oh, wait, this looks like maybe it was edited or something. Anyway, regardless, okay. Oh, it was in France. Who knows what time they're on. Buying weapons together on this scale is a new step for EU, which has seen efforts to collaborate more on defense propelled by Russia's war. Brussels said EU firms making ammunition need to switch to war economy mode after scaling back since the end of the Cold War. Understand that while Russia and China are meeting, the news is coming out that the EU is all going to collaborate together on purchasing arms and ammunition for Ukraine. Like, this isn't going to end from everyone just shaking hands, all right? 17 European Union countries plus Norway agreed on Monday to jointly procure ammunition to help Ukraine and to replenish their own stockpiles, the EU's European Defense Agency said. The project opens the way for EU member states and Norway to proceed along two paths, a 2-year fast-track procedure for 155mm artillery rounds and a 7-year project to acquire multiple ammunition types, the agency said in a statement. The country signed a so-called project arrangement setting out the terms of reference for their joint procurement effort. The document is a precursor to starting talks to the industry with the aim of signing contracts. They're going to buy all the ammo. I'm just throwing that out there, okay? Yeah, we're talking bigger stuff than what we usually get to play with here. But I think these moves and this war is eventually going to put another squeeze on the ammo market. That's just my thought process. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure during previous wars here in the United States, ammo was hard to come by, all right? Austria, Belgium, Croatia, Cyprus, Czechia, Czechia. I don't like saying it that way. The Czech Republic. There you go. Nice in English to say. Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Luxembourg, Malta, the Netherlands, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Sweden, and Norway have signed, the agency said. More member states have already expressed their intent to join the initiative soon following national procedures. All right. Well, they're buying the ammo. They're going to keep it going. Listen. This isn't going to just stop, okay? What else is happening that means this war is not going to just stop? And by the way, when wars don't just stop, they just get worse. They don't improve. They eventually end, and generally in a very flamboyant way. Because wars don't just, like, slowly die down and go, oh, I guess, we're all just kind of done, so have a nice day, right? No, they end in a very dramatic fashion. They end in a way that is memorable and generally ends in something happening, right? U.S. sending ammunition, tanker trucks, and boats to Ukraine. This was posted yesterday. The State Department announced Monday, well, I guess that's today. Who are these people? The State Department announced Monday that the U.S. will send Ukraine $350 million in weapons and equipment. Man, I'm glad we have all this money. It must be all the taxes I had to pay this year. Oh well. As fierce battles with Russian forces continue for control of the city of Bakhmut and troops prepare for an expected spring offensive. The latest package of aid includes a large amount of various types of ammunition, such as rockets for the High Mobility Artillery Rocket Systems, or the HIMARS, right? And an undisclosed number of fuel tanker trucks and riverine boats, okay? More and more stuff. Lots more stuff. More and more money. Lots more money, okay? And one more special ingredient when it comes to war, and that is soldiers, okay? NATO's proposal of 300,000 force along Russia's borders may prove challenging to fulfill. The proposed plan would involve deploying up to 300,000 troops to the border, a task that would require extensive coordination and resources from the 30 members. NATO's ambitious proposal to deploy a 300,000 strong force along Russia's borders may prove to be a challenging test for the alliance's members, as per a report from Politico. The proposed plan of deploying up to 300,000 troops to the border is a task that would require extensive coordination and resources from the 30 member countries. However, the plan may face obstacles as some allies have expressed concerns about their own ammunition stocks, which would need to be replenished in order to support such a deployment. Wait, how are they approaching the ammo? What are they going to do to get more ammo? To address these challenges, NATO military leaders are expected to submit updated regional defense plans under the proposed plan. The first echelon of NATO troops would consist of approximately 100,000 soldiers, with readiness to deploy within 10 days. These troops may include those from Poland, Norway, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The second echelon of troops, comprising soldiers from countries such as Germany, would provide support within 10 to 30 days. 300,000 troops on Russia's border. That's not going to settle things down, right? Listen, let me give you this from like a business perspective, just because that's a lot of my background, to be honest with you, is running businesses and numbers and stuff, right? But here's what I'll give you from my point of view with some level of expertise, I guess, if I were to take this exact situation and put it into a business lens, right? Okay, so and what I ran often was restaurants in the restaurant business, okay? So food, industry, hospitality, many years of my life. As a restaurant, I'm going to order a ton of product, lots of inventory, okay? We got Mother's Day coming up. So I'm going to order 4 times as much inventory as I would usually order, right? I'm going to get fully stocked up on bread and meats and vegetables and produce and everything else I need. Dairy, out the wazoo. We're going to have a lot of ice cream to sell, right? So I'm going to order all this stock and fully stock my shelves, even though it's usually a bad idea. But I am anticipating this really big holiday that I know I'm going to sell tons of food on, and I need to make sure I don't run out of anything and ruin somebody's Mother's Day, because that's like the worst thing you can do to a mom, right? So I'm going to pay a ton more money than I would usually pay, and I'm going to have a lot more stock on inventory than I would usually have, because I know this day is coming, right? I guarantee you, after spending all that money and having all that storage taken up and scheduling all the help I would need to get through that day, I don't know, like 300,000 troops, the last thing I'm going to do is close on Mother's Day and say, you know what, never mind, it's a Sunday and we're all just going to take the day off. Okay? Now, I bought the stuff. I scheduled the people. I got everybody in place. I got everything ready to go. We're going to do this holiday. I don't care what it takes. Power went out? Oh, well, I'm going to Home Depot and we're running off some generators, baby. Right? Like, this is what they're doing. They're not going to walk away from this investment, which is exactly what I just described. An investment in completing a task of having a very successful event, okay? You don't just walk away from all of this investment. Billions of dollars, tons of logistics, people being trained and put on the front lines just to walk down the street one day and say, hey, never mind, I think we're good now. Thanks for cooling it down a little bit. We'll just go back home, right? All the money we just spent, all the investment we made, all the countries in Europe coming together to buy all the ammunition, all of that effort we're just going to let go by because war's bad and we just don't want to do it, right? So Russia's saying they're going to stop, and oh, thank God, because we really didn't want to have to use any of that stuff we bought and have on hand, and we really didn't want to have to bring all the troops home that we sent over to the border, and we didn't want to have to, spend any more time training them, but we did. So, thank God we can just pull everything back, go home, and yeah, we wasted a lot of product and a lot of money and a lot of people's time, but it's fine because of the greater good, right? I don't think that's how it's going to work. And that's just based on like a business perspective. You see what I'm saying? Like, you wouldn't make this investment with the idea of it like not happening. Like, you're just not going to. And you could say that this is all deterrence, right? And you could say that this is all in order to be, proactively ready for if it does happen. So from that same business standpoint, you could say, well, maybe you just ordered all that stuff because you were worried about getting suddenly busy and you weren't sure if you're going to or not, but you wanted to make sure you could handle it if that time came. Yeah, okay. That's true, but if you do that too often, guess what happens? Your business closes. You lose your business because you always overspend compared to what you earn, and you can no longer support the business, so you have to shut the doors. So, both ways you look at it, it doesn't end well. And that's just kind of how I'm looking at things based on, my expertise and based on things that I have experience with that I can kind of put into that perspective to simplify that analyzation, right? Is that even a word? Analyzation? I think I heard somebody say that recently on a live stream, and I was like, did you just say that because you ran out of words to say for a second? And then I just said it. So maybe that's what happened, right? All right, Prepper Now, good to see you. Thank you for being here, sir. I appreciate it. Let's see. Northern Girl Hobbies. Invest in good things. Equity. Get rid of the crap you don't need. Well, hold on now. Maybe don't get rid of all the crap you don't need, because maybe some of that crap could still have some value. One thing that I've always heard, and this is something that the prepper community can definitely comment on, but preppers have always told me that like in the Great Depression, when everyone had nothing, every single thing had value to it. Like everything had value. Like they didn't throw anything away. If you had the most ripped up pair of jeans you ever seen in your life, they're getting repurposed for something else, right? If a chair broke to the point of no return, maybe it was burned for firewood. Maybe it was repurposed into something else. Like everything was used again and again and again. They did not throw things away, right? So we're heading towards a situation where that might be our new normal again, where you can't really afford to just throw things away and replace them, which, might be healthy in some ways, right? This consumerist culture we've developed where we just, oh no, my shoelace came undone. I got to go buy a new pair of shoes, right? Like that's not healthy in the sense of, anybody's economic situation. But that is very much what our culture has become. So, that's just what you brought to mind when you said that, was like, maybe we should like kind of change our mindset to say, well, maybe some of those things I think I don't need may have purpose at some point, right? Based on how things are going economically anyway. And man, like the things that you don't think about until you suddenly do. Tell me this one, and this is one that gets everybody. You know that cord in that box full of random cords you have that you never ever need? And you finally look at that stupid box full of old cords from like your Sega Genesis. And you're like, man, I am so sick of looking at this box of cords. And you finally throw that thing away. And you're like, dang, that felt so good to get rid of that stupid box that's been following me for like 10 years, right? And then all of a sudden, a day comes up where it's like, hey, you have that cord for that Sega Genesis? Because I just found that system and I was hoping I could set it up to, try it out again. It'd be kind of fun. Man, you threw that box away, right? I swear that happens all the time. You got, Viv B, not the cord box. I know, the cord box. Like, why do we have the cord box? I got so many cords. You can get all the cords you want. The cord box, man, that thing is still around. You got to have that cord box. You better not touch that thing. All right, one day you're going to be like, I need that cord box again. We all know it's coming. Prepper Now, you know about Sega. Anyway, look. Let me know in the chat. Did this live stream kind of cover why I'm saying the things that I'm saying? Get ready to survive unrest, state failures, and the fallout of war. I think I connected the dots pretty well as to what we can expect here in the near future, as well as in the far future, based on historical precedent, based on what's happening here, and what's happening in other places, as well as how this war isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And I think when you connect all those dots, it's very hard to look at it and say, things are going to be fine, right? And my hope is that they will be fine. I honestly hope that. Now, I want to mention something, and I think this is important. I told a friend of mine, John, you know who you are, that I wasn't going to rant tonight. But, man, I'm going to just say this to give everybody something to think about, okay? Listen, people come at me a lot in the comments and will say things frequently. They'll say, okay, you're talking how, SHTF is happening, right? I put out a recent video where I was like, look, this collapse is like beginning. Like, this is like the real thing, like where it starts. Like, you guys should see that as a prepper from a prepper perspective, that like there are some defining moments kind of occurring right now that we'll look back on and say, oh yeah, we should have kind of like seen that coming, right? So that was what that commentary was about. And then I gave people some ideas about different preps that were at different financial levels as to like what, might still be a valuable asset to have even after a huge economic collapse of some sort. So a lot of what I got in that video was, so you're telling me this is the end, like it's the end of the world, SHTF is here, but then you're like, but still go out and buy this stuff, or still go out and do these things, and still go out and get this like, solar generator, or this night vision, or whatever else it is, because, according to you, the world's going to end, but at the same time, you're still telling people to buy things, right? And here's what I want to tell you guys, and this is how I operate, and everything I do on this channel is just from my perspective of like what I'm doing. Like, this is what I'm doing. This is my strategy. This is how I think we could, find a good solution to a problem. Like, this is just me doing what I'm doing. I've said that from the very beginning. I'm sharing my preparedness journey with everybody else because I'm not where I want to be yet. So I still have a lot of things to do, a lot of stuff to learn, and a lot of places to go. But no matter the situation, a nuclear bomb could go off tomorrow, and that's not going to stop me from trying to still get more prepared until I can literally no longer get more prepared. So, yes, do I think that we are currently experiencing like the beginning of the SHTF collapse that we all talk about here in this community? Yeah, I mean, I just laid it all out for you. There's so much happening in the world right now that points to that exact situation. Do I hope that we don't do it? 100%. I hope that doesn't actually happen. That's literally what I hope for. Now, even though I believe that's what's happening, I'm still going to keep preparing until the very last day, until I cannot prepare anymore, until I no longer have the capability to get more prepared. Just stopping preparing makes no sense. So regardless of the situation that's happening, I'm going to keep moving forward. And I'm going to approach every single day as if it's one more opportunity to do something else or to do something more until that plug literally gets pulled, right? Until that emergency broadcast system finally comes up on my screen and says, emergency alert, stay in your homes, and this is the broadcast system, yada, 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 right? That's it then. I guess now I'm not going to place any more orders. I guess I'm not going to go anywhere to grab more supplies. I guess I'm not going to work on that one last project I was trying to put together. Oh well, I did everything I could up until that very moment. And that's how I try to approach everything. So regardless of me saying, look, this is the beginning of something big, and this is not a good place to be right now, why would that be an indicator to just not prepare anymore, right? Of course you should keep preparing. Use every day we have to keep doing something to better yourself, even if that means just resting. Literally, if that means sitting on your butt for an entire day, gaming or whatever else you want to do, and then just taking a nap, we need that too sometimes. So do that. But understand from a prepper perspective that you're just putting some more power back into the power bank, right? Like, we can move forward until we cannot. So I will continue to move forward until we cannot. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to be logical or very forward thinking as to what's happening in the world and what's happening to us here in the United States. And like I said, a nuclear bomb could go off in New York, and I live in North Dakota, and I'm still going to do things until I can't do things anymore. And that's just how it's got to go. I know, I get it. But I wanted to mention that because I don't always get to fully develop my thoughts and put my point of view or perspective out into every single video I produce. Because if I were to do that, people will get very bored by the end of every single video. Brooklyn, have a good night. I appreciate you. Crazy Joe, you got no problem, man. And I can't literally explain my thought process in every video, or else I'll give you a 100% honest evaluation of what that would do. It would actually hurt my channel, and it would cause my viewership to go down, which means less people would actually receive the messages that we're trying to put out here in the community. So it's not worth doing in every single video. But it is frustrating sometimes because I'm like, man, well, if I could have mentioned that, it would have helped, but I guess I don't think I should have to either. I think it should be pretty obvious that until you can't, do what you can. That's it. All right, listen. Yardbirds, the hour and the man have met. And you know what? It's an hour and 12 minutes. You're 100% accurate on that one. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here. I think it is going to have to be about that time. Seiko Mag, an old colonel once said to me a while back, if a governing body is prepping, you should be as well. And I 100% agree with you on that one. That is literally what we should do. If the government's doing it, there's a good chance you should be doing it as well. And if there's anything else you guys need from me, magicprepper.com, always a great resource for ways to communicate, ways to build a community, aka the Discord, if that's something you're interested in. You can also find ways to support the channel there, like the Subscribe Star page, which is $5 a month. It's basically Patreon without a lot of the issues I was having with Patreon. And at the same time, there is preparedness incentives there. I've got morale patches and stuff I'm doing for the members over there. I'm trying my best to balance everything, but it can be difficult. But I appreciate all the support that I get here. So thank you all so much for being involved. If you need anything else from me at all, you know what to do. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.